I was a new student to Southern Lehigh High School in Pennsylvania. Going into my junior year of high school, not knowing anyone was really rough. Everyone obviously had their friend groups sorted out by then. The worst part was lunchtime though. My school wouldn't let juniors leave for lunch, only seniors, so I had to eat in the cafeteria. I was dreading it because I knew I'd have no one to sit with, and I didn't want to force myself into a random table. When lunchtime finally came, however, I walked into the cafeteria with my tray of food, looking for a place to sit. Every single table was taken. I didn't even have the option of sitting alone. But there was one table in the corner of the cafeteria with only 2 kids sitting at it. That was the least intimidating spot to sit, so I walked over and asked if I could sit there. They both looked at each other, and one of them said, "Yeah." I noticed upon sitting down that the 2 were identical twins. They looked like they were partially of Hispanic heritage, but they didn't have accents. They honestly seemed all right. They introduced themselves as Antonio and Bruno, and they had a conversation with me. They invited me to hang out with them after school, and honestly, I figured, why not? I had to start off somewhere as far as making friends. I got their numbers, and after school, I went home to drop off all my stuff. Shortly after, I got a text from Bruno telling me he and his brother were planning on hanging out. He told me to meet them around 9 that night at the nearby cemetery that was like a 10-minute walk from my house. He said there was a cool hangout spot near there. Plus, the first day of school was on a Friday, so he had off the next day. I had nothing to do, so I said, yeah, I'm down. When the time came, Bruno texted me one more time, asking if I was still coming. I said, yeah, I'm going to leave in a few, and confirmed we were meeting on the road by the cemetery. He said, yeah, so I began my walk in the dark to the cemetery. The longer I walked, the more I thought about my whole move and being the new kid in high school, and thinking about the fact that I was literally walking to a cemetery at night to hang out with 2 kids I just met. But anyway, I got to the little road next to the cemetery and asked Bruno where they were. He started typing right away, and he said they were in the woods, hanging by a small lake that they wanted to show me. Then he promptly sent his location. So I made my way into the woods, pushing branches out of my way, using my tiny phone flashlight as my only light. I started calling for Bruno and Antonio as I felt like I was close enough, according to the location he sent me at least. Suddenly I heard footsteps, so I stopped. Definitely footsteps approaching me, but they were very low and slow. They called out that they'd better not be trying to scare me. When they weren't answering me though, I decided this was stupid. I turned and started walking back towards the road. But those footsteps I mentioned earlier, they turned from quiet and slow to fast, and before I could even react, someone had their nails digging into my neck, effectively choking me. I heard a familiar voice screaming, "Grab him! Grab him!" I managed to break free from the sort of chokehold and sprinted towards the road. I know they followed me until the tree line by the road. I was faster than them, and I could run for miles. And that's what I did. I ran straight home and told my parents. They considered calling the cops, but I thought it would be better to get pictures of the nail marks on my neck and report it to the school the next day. That's what we did, and with the help of the text that I got from Bruno, I was able to get the 2 students expelled. My parents made me block both their numbers. I didn't exactly argue with that though. My parents wanted me to confirm that these kids didn't know where we lived, and I told them simply, "Not as far as I know." So anyway, one night about a week later, I woke up to my room feeling really cold. I heard the sound of wind blowing into my room, and I looked at the window to see it was slid completely open. I wondered if my mom came in to open it, but that would make absolutely no sense. It was like 50 degrees out that night. I walked over to it and looked down below. A few feet below my bedroom window, there's a part of the exterior of my house that comes outward, creating a sort of ledge underneath my window that my father always told me to jump onto in case of a fire. I shut my window and walked over to my parents' bedroom. I gently knocked and opened the door, and my mom groggily asked what. I had to ask her if she opened my window. She sat up, saying, "No, why?" I told her, in a louder, more concerned voice now, that my window was opened all the way by somebody. She started shaking my dad to wake him up and go check my room with me, but when he woke up, he told me to grow up and go back to sleep. I left my parents' door open as I walked back down the hall to my room. Then I picked up on something that I'm surprised I picked up on. My door. It seemed to be half shut now, as opposed to completely open when I left. I pushed the door open just a little bit so I could get a look through the crack and see if, someone was behind the door. Even though I had the thought of the possibility, I never could have actually expected to see it. There was someone hiding behind my door. I screamed for my dad like a little girl. I screamed so loud I'm sure it could be heard 3 doors down. Then my door suddenly slammed shut, just as my dad came rushing out of his room over to me. I screamed, "There's people in my room," so we barged into the room and turned the light on. At that moment, we saw the leg of a person jumping out my window. My dad ran to the window, then downstairs and out the front door to attempt to chase them down, but he came back a few minutes later out of breath, saying he didn't see anyone. Full of energy and fear, I swore it had to be those twins that I got expelled. My dad called the police, and I had to talk to them when they arrived, explaining the whole story back to the incident in the woods. My father backed up my story, but without proof of who entered, they said there wasn't anything they could do. They merely ordered us to lock the doors and consider installing cameras outside. As positive I am that it was either one of or both of those twins in my room, after getting through a solid couple months of sleeping in fear, nothing to this nature ever happened again. Looking back now, I don't know why I was so willing to meet these kids in the woods at night. I should have realized in the cafeteria that day that they looked like trouble, and I should have stayed away. Freshman year of high school, 2007, gym class, last period. 4 million liked Facebook post with 762 likes. We had a substitute gym teacher on one of the stormiest days of the year. He was an older man, not a senior citizen, but gray, maybe 55 to 60. He took attendance, and when he passed me, he did a double take at me, which I found a bit uncomfortable. Not to float my own boat, but I always understood I looked older and really good for a freshman in high school. The sub told us to get into our volleyball teams, and he disappeared into the hall by the locker rooms for a while. 40 minutes went by, and the period was over. It was time for us to get changed and go home. I got into the locker room, but for some reason, my locker wasn't opening. I tried my usual combination over and over and over. It wouldn't click open though. I had to go to the sub and let him know to ask for my combination again. I figured maybe the combo just slipped from my mind for some reason. The sub told me to give him a few minutes and he'd get the list of locker combos. I waited outside the office, and out he finally came with a book in his hands, open to a specific page. He walked into the girls' locker room with me, which I didn't expect him to do. The locker room was basically empty now, with one girl finishing up changing. He walked over to my locker and tried the combination written down on the paper. It didn't work, no matter how many times he tried it. Each time he tried it and failed, he would look at me and laugh. I would force myself to laugh along to be polite, but it started getting weird. He put his hand on my shoulder as he said, "We'll figure this out." He tried the combination again, with his hand still on my shoulder. When it didn't work again, I felt his hand slowly started inching down from my shoulder to my lower back. I pushed myself away and grabbed my bag, saying, "It's okay, I'm late for my bus." He tried a combo in the locker one more time, and it opened. He smiled and walked away. I waited till I heard the locker room door shut. Then I proceeded to getting changed quickly, when suddenly the room went dark. I finished pulling out my pants and shut my locker in the dark. I threw on my backpack and started walking to the back exit of the locker room, which led outside. I feared that the sub would be waiting right by the door for me. I got predatory vibes from him. When I got to the end of that specific aisle of lockers I was in the intersection of 2 rows. I'd have to turn down left to get to the exit door, but still, naturally, I had to look right to make sure that it was clear. There was a little light seeping in from one single rectangular window that sat under the ceiling. It was enough for me to see him peeking at me from around the wall of lockers. So that's when I ran for the exit door. He came over behind me, saying, wait, it's not what it looks like." I ran outside into the rain off the campus of the high school and walked the rest of the way home, giving me time to reflect on what happened. By the time I got home, soaking wet, it came to me that he most likely changed my locker combination somehow, as a way of getting alone with me in the locker room. As for what he could have possibly been planning to do when he cut the lights, I never wanted to imagine. Honestly, I was too emotionally scared and quite frankly embarrassed to tell anyone about it. Not even my parents or friends. It was something I just kept to myself all these years because truthfully, I just don't feel comfortable telling people. When I was in high school, I was in the band. At my school, band was basically an easy A. It was either that, orchestra, or chorus, so I went with band. Anyhow, our band teacher, Mr. Nicholson, had the grading system set up so that as long as you attended class and went to your weekly lessons, you got an A. Sadly, towards the end of one quarter, I was missing 2 lessons. Because of that, my grade was a B. I went to him after class to ask if I could make up to lessons, and even though he seemed reluctant, he said he would let me come in during a lunch period and practice in one of the downstairs storage rooms to get credit for a lesson. I was more than happy with that, because realistically, I would probably just play games on my phone anyway instead of actually practicing. I arrived at the music room during my lunch period the next day. So I took my saxophone and headed down the stairs outside the music room towards the basement area for the music department. It was always kind of creepy down there, because absolutely no one besides the music teachers would go down there usually, and the lights were kind of shitty. I'd only been down there a couple times before that day. But anyway, I walked down the hallway, and on either side were a bunch of doors that led into small, maybe 7 by 7 feet rooms. All of these rooms were used for storing things like chairs, music stands, spare instruments, Christmas decorations, and whatever. I stepped into one of the rooms and shut the door. I set up my music on one of the stands in the room, just in case Mr. Nicholson were to come down to check on me. But really, I didn't plan on actually playing. I started playing games on my phone and then flicked darkness, like as dark as it could get, minus my phone screen. I looked over to the light switch in the room just instinctively, flicked it up and down a few times, but that did nothing. I stumbled as I got up from the seat to open the door to more darkness. I held my phone out in front of me to light up this little hallway, even if it was just barely. I think I had like an iPhone 3 or something, and those old ones didn't have flashlights, but anyway, that little light from my phone was enough to see one of the doors open near the end of the hall, and I heard something being dragged in that room, like one of the big plastic containers. There was also manic breathing, followed by animal-like grunting. Then I saw a big plastic container being pushed out of that room into the hallway. As I saw this, I turned off my phone screen and went back into the room I was just in. I shut the door so quietly, I don't know what exactly I was thinking in that moment, that I decided to hide. But I think the strange sounds I was hearing from this person, mixed with the random blackout, made me wary of staying in that hallway. Whoever that was blocking the stairs though. Of course, I got no reception down in that little basement area. All I felt comfortable doing was sitting in that room and waiting for the lights to hopefully turn back on. But the lights seemed like they were never going to turn back on. So I decided I would try and get back upstairs again. I quietly opened the door with my phone in front of me for light. Then I stepped into the hall. I inched up a little closer to the stairs. Then I heard something again. I quickly crept into the next closest room with the door open and shut it. I still didn't know what I was hiding from. Could it have been a staff member? Or a janitor? At that point, the only reason I had of thinking it wasn't was because they only appeared down there after the lights turned off. I stood in that room in complete darkness, only listening and waiting for another sound from outside. But you know how when you're in a room with someone, even if you don't necessarily hear them, you can kind of just sense their presence? That's suddenly the feeling I got standing in that pitch black room. I lifted my shaking hand up and pressed the home button on my phone to turn on the screen, just for half a second. That was enough to see someone standing in the corner of this little storage room 3 feet away from me. I pretended I didn't see anything, but it was too late. Shh, was what I heard, breaking the silence. Then I hand patted my shoulder twice and started squeezing it. I basically dove for the doorknob, struggling to find it at first, but pulling the door open when I did. The man in the room with me tried pushing the door shut after I opened it, but I was already out. I ran up the stairs and out the door to the main level of the music hall, where the lights were still on. I ran to Mr. Nicholson to tell him, out of breath. He called security to check the basement section of the music hall, but security came back upstairs and said besides a bunch of music equipment moved around, there wasn't anyone down there. The rest of the period, Mr. Nicholson canceled his flute lesson, and I sat there in the room with him and 5 flute players explaining the whole story in detail. Without cameras in the music hall, there was no way of catching whoever went down there and killed the power for the basement. It seemed that he was trying to steal expensive music equipment. That or God knows what else. The next day, I was called into the dean's office to give my story of what happened, and the rest is history. One night, my friends and I hatched a genius plan. We'd sneak into the high school basement through one of the windows that was broken and never fixed. The thing about this window, you'd have to hop a short metal gate surrounding an outside staircase leading to the basement. Not that it would effectively stop anyone, but it added that extra barrier that makes you feel like you were really doing something devious when you crossed over it. We made sure there weren't any security cars anywhere nearby and hopped the gate. Crawling in through the window proved difficult, considering we had to boost ourselves up, then crawl through an insanely skinny opening. But once we were in, we were in. We kind of dispersed from each other to explore different areas. One thing was for sure, the basement of the school was a mess and anything but interesting. There was little light. One small white light was on in a far corner, and the exit sign light actually produced more light than you'd think. I was looking around when I saw one of my friends in front of me. He whispered, "Let's go upstairs." So I followed him upstairs and he opened the door up to the main hallway of the school. Everything was dark. I always thought there were at least some lights left on in the school at night, but no, not a single light was on, and all that really stood out as far as the eye could see were the various exit signs glowing red. I followed my friend down the hall and remembered saying, "Dude, this is really creepy," and he replied back, "Sure." But I realized he was right. Who knew if somebody else could be in the building besides my friends and I? Little did I know just yet. I followed my friend to the bathroom and he went into one of the stalls. I whispered, "Hurry up!" I waited for a while, then my phone started to ring. I picked up and it was one of my friends, Chris. He asked, "Where the hell did you go?" I said, "I'm upstairs with either Roland or Brandon." He said, "What do you mean? They're with me." And right after, both Brandon and Roland said hi, apparently on speakerphone. I stuttered the word "I" and stopped, trying to think straight. Then there was a laughing coming from in the stall. Not the laugh of any of my friends. I looked up at the stall. There was someone looking over it at me, probably standing on the toilet. I screamed, "Holy shit," over and over into the phone as I left the bathroom. Shortly after I was out, I heard the stall door slam shut. I tried to run back to the basement in the dark, but it wasn't too easy to find in the dark. Luckily, I managed to find it, so I started to scream their names as I ran down the stairs. I screamed, "Go, go," when they answered, and we one by one jumped off some kind of bucket onto the window ledge and crawled back outside. I was the first one out though, afraid that person from the bathroom was following. When we were all outside, I explained to them, out of breath, while also laughing now that I felt safe with all of them next to me. I guess we were loud or something though, because as we all just started looking around at the whole school building and all the classroom windows, in one of the downstairs windows was someone with their hands pressed up on the glass. We could only see maybe half their face. I said, "That's gotta be him," as Roland ushered us to get the hell out of there. We ran until we were off the premises of the school, and that was that. We came up with a lot of possible explanations, but none of them really made sense. Obviously, we never did anything like that again, though. During senior year of high school, my friend, who all call Jake, and I had a terrifying encounter. Jake's parents were out of town, and he had a decently big house, so we threw a party that weekend. The party wasn't anything too crazy, just about 20 or 40 people from our grade. Jake was my best friend, and also my neighbor. I lived a couple of houses down from him, so I helped him set up and make sure that nothing that could break was out in the open. We also blocked off the stairs that led to the upper levels of the house, so that the party could be contained to the main floor and basement. All the people showed up right around the same time, and the party was underway. It ended up being a fun party. There was music and dancing downstairs and games being played upstairs like Mario Kart and other things. As the night wore on, I found myself having to pee, really bad. The bathroom on the main floor and the one in the basement were both in use, so even though it was freezing outside, I went out to pee in the backyard. While I was back there by a tree, I happened to look back towards Jake's big house. Way up on the third floor, I very quickly saw a flicker of light. After I finished, I didn't see the light again, but I strained my eyes looking up at the windows and I could see somebody moving around. When I went back inside, I found Jake and brought up to him that somebody was upstairs. As mentioned earlier, Jake's parents were gone and he didn't have any other siblings who would still be up there, so it was somebody who wasn't supposed to be up there. Jake concluded that somebody from the party probably made their way up there, even though we had blocked off the stairs and put up a sign saying not to go up there. I offered to go with Jake, and we headed up the stairs, expecting to find somebody from our high school, someone that was maybe looking for another bathroom or a guy and girl who wanted someplace for private. Anyway, we checked all the rooms on the second and third floor until we got to his parents' bedroom. We opened the bedroom door to find a man looking through the closet drawers. His face was covered, so he couldn't make out much about it. He clearly had not heard us coming from the carpeted floors, because he whipped around, very surprised, and raised a gun towards both of us. Taken aback, we instantly threw our hands up saying, "Don't shoot." He did not say a word. He just motioned for us to move out of the way of the door and then proceeded to leave out the door once we were far enough out of the way. On his way past, he pistol whipped my friend Jake in the face before running down the hallway, down the stairs, and out the front door. We knew this because people who were up in the living room for the party saw him dash right past them and then out the door, and saw him run down the street into the darkness. Looking back years later in hindsight, we definitely should have called the cops, but at the time we were kids hosting a party. There were some people at the house who were drinking that were underage, and we didn't want to get in trouble for that. Jake's face ended up being all right, but it took a bit longer to recover from the trauma of being held at gunpoint by who we assumed was a robber, unless something else was going on that we missed. This happened to me many years ago, back when I was younger in my high school days. I ended up going to an all-boys boarding school for high school, I guess just because my older brothers had gone there. The boarding school was in the middle of a one-stoplight town and perched on a hill. The school used to be an old monastery, and it was huge, with 4 stories including a basement that held a boiler room and long winding hallways. Every student had a job to help keep the place running, which we would rotate through. One of my jobs at the time of this story was to clean the gymnasium at night. I would have to sweep the floor and make sure everything was put away and ready for use the next day. The gym had 2 levels. The upper part was for weightlifting, and I could see most of the gym on the upper level from the bottom level where the basketball court was. One night I stepped into the gym ready to start sweeping. As I walked farther inside, I noticed a basketball rolling slowly across the floor. I paused and scanned the room to look for anybody who was in the gym or any open doors. However, everything was shut tight and I couldn't see anybody. I told myself that it was just a wind or some random movement, and I was about to start sweeping, but the ball kept rolling. I stood frozen just in confusion as I watched the ball roll a complete circle around the gym and stopping right at my feet. Obviously that's not normal, and I kept looking around to see who was playing a prank on me or to find a logical explanation. I heard a creaking sound and looked into the darkness of the upper level of the gym in the weight room. Suddenly, a girl came into my view close to the railing of the second level. She stopped walking and stared at me. She looked about my age, maybe a bit younger. The anguish she must have been going through was painful to see, and she scurried toward the railing. Her expression was blank, and her eyes were wide. The moment our eyes met, she turned and bolted down the stairs. What came next was a scream that I can't quite describe. It pierced the silence and sent chills down my spine. I backed up against the wall of the gym, very scared. I didn't see the girl coming down the stairs, but watched as she took a sharp left when she got to the bottom and darted through the main door of the gym. I wasn't supposed to leave the school grounds after a specific time for curfew, but curiosity got the best of me, so I went after the girl who had run away through the main gym doors and into the night. I ran onto some steps nearby that had a good vantage point to the surrounding area. I would have never seen the girl again, except for the second scream, which I heard out by the road. From my vantage point in the dim moonlight, I watched as the girl sprinted down the hill on the road away from the school until she eventually disappeared into the night. To this day in my life, I've never seen anything else close to what I experienced that night. I still don't know if the girl I had seen was a real person or if she was some type of a ghost or spirit. I have no idea what to believe because the way the basketball had rolled around the gym was very supernatural, but the girl seemed very real. She had pushed open the doors of the gym like a physical person would have, and the fact that I saw her run all the way down the hill was strange. I asked my fellow students, teachers, and brothers about what I had experienced, but nobody knew what I was talking about and dismissed it. I graduated and left that school behind, which has been closed for a while now. I still wonder if any other students had experienced something similar to me before the school was closed for good. When I was a junior in high school, our school welcomed a foreign exchange student from Romania. His name was Adrian, and he was at our school for about a month. At first, I didn't think much of him. We'd sit together in the cafeteria, and he'd tell stories about his life back home, but something felt off about him. The thing that I noticed was that he would never talk about his family, even though people were interested and wanted to learn more about him. He would change the topic every time it was brought up. One week, we were partnered for a project in school. While we worked throughout the week, I noticed how he always seemed distracted. Many times he'd pull out his phone and type furiously, and sometimes even talk voice memos into his phone, speaking angrily in Romanian. I asked him about it, wanting to make sure everything was okay, but he just brushed it off, saying he was checking in with friends. Also, he began showing up at school with really nice clothing sometimes, or would have something with him which people would wonder how he had the money for that. A prime example is when he showed up one day with an expensive motorizing scooter. He never talked about his family to us, but people just assumed that they must be rich and would often send him money or gifts to help him feel more comfortable in a different country. After he began going to school with us for a month now, one day police showed up at our school. They pulled him out of class, saying he was being arrested for credit card scams, which would explain all the nice things that he had. We all watched in confusion as he tried to flee and escape from the cops. It was later revealed that he had murdered and stolen the identity of a boy back in Romania who was supposed to be the foreign exchange student coming to our school. This guy who went to high school with us every day for a month and we were kind of friends with was a murderer and committed many other crimes. He was actually 25 years old, not 17 like he claimed. After that whole scenario, our school put the foreign exchange program on hold. It ended up being a tough time for a lot of students who had been friends with this guy. We were all not only sad about what happened to the foreign exchange student we were supposed to have met, but also freaked out that we had spent a month of school with a criminal. All in all, it was just a very strange and scary thing for this guy to do, and I'm glad that he got caught so soon. The summer after graduation, I took a job as a janitor at my old high school. Over the summer, the school was mostly empty. Most days, it would just be me and a couple of other janitors who worked at the school full-time. Mostly I would work on my own since the other janitors had big summer projects to work on usually, and I'd be left with the lesser jobs. My normal routine consisted of me cleaning out lockers in classrooms and getting them ready for next year of school. One afternoon towards the end of the summer, I was cleaning out lockers on my own when I heard someone approaching. The other janitors had told me over the lunch break that they would be working in the auditorium for the rest of the day, so I didn't think that I would see them again after lunch. The high school swimming pool was open for public use during this summer, so it wasn't uncommon to get a wanderer who was just looking for the pool or just checking out the school. I watched as this guy turned around the corner, and when he saw me, he began approaching. He came up to me and asked me for my set of keys, saying that he needed to unlock a bathroom by the pool. Firstly, I wasn't just going to give some random guy my set of keys. Second, there was a lifeguard in the pool who had keys and would have unlocked the bathroom or been able to assist. I didn't want to be rude to the man though, so I told him I could just go with him and unlock the door. However, he refused the offer and persisted that I should just give him the keys and he'd bring them right back. I told him that I couldn't do that and to go to the lifeguard for assistance. Suddenly, he approached me, reaching for my keys, grabbing towards the lanyard that was dangling out of my pocket. I quickly took a couple of steps back from him, expecting him to stop. But he didn't, and started to chase after me. I took off sprinting down the hall, scared, now wondering what this guy's deal was. My plan was to race towards the auditorium because I knew the other janitors would be there. However, the man was gaining on me and I had to improvise. I figured that I knew the layout of the school better than he did, so I quickly opened the office door and went inside. I went into the office because it was actually quite a large space and was confusing with many different outbranching hallways, as well as 2 exits. As I had hoped, I was able to quickly navigate my way through the office and go out to the second exit into a hallway on the other side, successfully gaining some ground on this guy. The auditorium was still on the complete opposite side of the school though, and I wasn't sure if I could outrun the man behind me for that long, so I decided to hide. There was a storage closet nearby. I yanked the door open and slipped inside, shutting it behind me. I stood in the dark, listening, waiting to hear the man emerge from the office area. Sure enough, about 10-15 seconds later, I heard the door open. She flicked on the lights in the hallway and stopped outside, as if to practice some sort of. I could hear him moving around, his footsteps echoing into the empty hall. I pressed my back against the wall, trying to control my breathing and not make any sort of a noise. I heard him walk past the closet multiple times, pacing back and forth outside. I think he was checking classroom windows to see if I had hidden in one of those. Finally, the footsteps faded as he jogged down the hallway, presumably still looking for me. I didn't even bother trying to make my way to the auditorium and other janitors, fearing that I might run into the man again on the way. Instead, I quietly made my way back into the office, using the landline in there to call the police. They arrived soon after, but the man was gone. They searched the school but didn't find the guy. There were only 2.5 weeks left of summer, so I stopped working a bit early and never went back to the job. I was in my junior year of high school, just trying to get through my classes like everybody else. One afternoon in school, I got a text from an unknown number. The text said, "I see you." At first I thought it was a prank from a friend, or even from somebody who didn't like me, so I laughed it off and ignored it. But the next day another message came through which said, "You're not safe." I didn't recognize the number, and it didn't seem like anybody from my school. The messages kept coming, with each one being more disturbing than the last, saying things like, "I know where you go to school," and "You can't hide from me." I wanted to tell somebody, but I had no idea who it was or if anything could be done. The next day, I sat in doing my work and I noticed Mr. Thompson, my history teacher, watching me more than usual. He was a strict teacher, so I just tried to ignore him, not wanting to get in trouble for something that I didn't know I was doing. As the week went on, the messages became more personal. I'd get sent stuff like, "I see you in the library," or "You're mine." Ha! The following Monday, I finally told our guidance counselor about it. After lunch, I decided to go to the library to read. It was while I was reading there that I had a realization moment. My teacher, Mr. Thompson, was also in the library grading papers. I hadn't noticed him before, but it now felt like he was watching me. Every time I looked up, he was glancing in my direction. I never expected the text that I was receiving to be from a teacher, but I was beginning to suspect him now. I decided to confront Mr. Thompson after class the next day. I questioned him about if he was sending creepy texts to me, also bringing up that I had seen him watching me in the library. His expression changed and he got very defensive, saying that he didn't know what I was talking about and told me to leave his classroom. Immediately after talking to him, I went to the principal's office and said I suspected Mr. Thompson of being the one who was sending me all those texts. The next day when I showed up for school, he was gone. The school announced he had taken a leave of absence for personal reasons and didn't give me any other explanation. He never came back to the school, at least the rest of the time that I was there. I never found out what happened to him, but the texts did stop the day he disappeared.